Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Bitter Pill. So, tonight I just wanted to make a short video that doubles as an announcement for a great event I've got going on tomorrow night. And that specifically is an interview with longtime activist and recently announced congressional candidate Jose Vega. And just that's Jose. He is well known for having interrupted various politicians' speeches to call them out, and not only politicians, but journalists and many others, to call them out for their support for atrocious U.S. foreign policy, such as the war in Ukraine, the proxy war against Russia, and U.S. complicity in the genocide in Gaza. So I will be talking with Jose tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time here on this channel, and there will be an announcement about it shortly. So I hope you can join us. So tonight, what I wanted to focus on is this. The UN agency responsible for providing, as its head Philip Lazzarini says, life-saving assistance to the people of Palestine, the United Nations, I forget what it stands for, but UNRWA. So UN agency that people in Gaza in particular are completely dependent on for much of their food and other essential goods, because Israel has destroyed Gaza's economy through the blockade that they've imposed for the past 17 and a half years or so. And recently, after the World Court, the International Court of Justice, ruled in favor of South Africa in its case against Israel for their genocide, which I talked about on here a few days ago, the U.S. and most of the other leading funders of UNRWA cut off their funding based on allegations by Israel that a small handful of UNRWA employees there in Gaza had participated in the October 7th Hamas-led uprising against Israel's occupation of Gaza. So here's a list of the countries that have cut off their funding to UNRWA and the amount of money they had previously contributed annually. So in 2022, the U.S. gave $343 million. I'm sorry, I forgot to share the tab. To UNRWA, that's almost 30% of its funding. Germany also cut off their funding, which in 2022 amounted to $200 million. The EU as a whole had contributed over $100 million. So I'll just run through the list here. You can read the figures yourself for how much money has been lost. We've got Sweden, Japan, France, Switzerland, Canada, the Netherlands, the UK, Italy, Australia, Austria, Finland, Iceland, Estonia. So, kind of a who's who of Western countries, the majority of Western countries, as well as Japan, which is kind of an honorary part of the West. It's more or less fully complicit in the imperialist policies of uh, the US, Canada, and Europe, and Australia, New Zealand, and so forth. So, anyway, 80% of its funding just gone. And as Philip Lazzarini points out, maybe not in this announcement, but in a different one, he said that if, excuse me, if at least a substantial portion of that aid is not restored shortly, then it's possible that UNRWA will be unable to continue its operations as before in Gaza as of the end of this month. He says, our humanitarian operation on which 2 million people depend as a lifeline in Gaza is collapsing. I am shocked such decisions are taken based on alleged behavior of a few individuals, and as the war continues, needs are deepening and famine looms. There's actually already famine in Gaza, as, excuse me, we've talked about before. Now, what's really troubling about this is that, yeah, there's still no, excuse me, there's still no evidence that any UNRWA employees were involved in the October 7th uprising. And, even if they were, even if there were a few, so what if, name your charitable organization that clearly does good in a community. If a few of its employees wind up being found guilty of some sort of criminal conduct or what have you, uh, does that invalidate the work of the organization as a whole? Of course not. And in this case, the work of UNRWA is essential in uh, you know, helping the people of Gaza sustain themselves because, as I said, their economy has been destroyed over the years. This gentleman, Dima Khatib, says, I'm a Palestinian refugee registered with UNRWA. This is where I got my vaccines as a child. Oh, UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Wait, that's still not saying what it stands for, even in their own thumbnail description on Twitter. They don't say. So, anyway, he says, this is where I got my vaccines as a child. UNRWA schools give basic education. UNRWA also has food supplies, etc. as part of the daily life of Palestinians dispossessed by Israel under, excuse me, the watch of the world. Now, what's disturbing about this cutoff of aid, besides the fact, simply the fact of cutting off aid that people have to have, is that there's no evidence whatsoever, excuse me, that anybody from the agency was involved in the, excuse me, October 7th attack. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, when asked about the reporting that there was no evidence of UN staffers involved in the October 7th attack, says, as you know, there's an investigation happening. We're going to let the investigation move forward. Now, wait a minute. The question that was asked to you, Ms. White House Press Secretary, was, look, there has been an investigation. It didn't find anything. So what are you going to do about it? And to be specific, the UK's Channel 4, which also incidentally was involved in the investigation of the numerous rape and other sexual misconduct allegations against Russell Brand, they investigated these claims about UNRWA staff being involved in the October 7th attack, and they concluded Israel provides no evidence to support this claim. In fact, if you just look at their document that they provided to various countries in the process of urging them to cut off UNRWA's funding, the document, according to Channel 4's investigation, contains no evidence at all that anybody from the staff was involved excuse me, in October 7th. Of course, as I've talked about many times before, there's nothing inherently wrong with Palestinians rising up against Israel's illegal military occupation of their land, including in the case of Gaza, encircling and blockading it, and not letting anybody in or out or any more than it desires as far as essential supplies in. That's still an occupation because it's effective control over the territory. But anyway, people have a right to resist that. Now, of course, it's politically probably counterproductive for staff members of an aid agency to be involved in a military operation, but in any case, they would be within their rights if they did so. It just wouldn't be a politically savvy thing to do. But in any case, there's just no evidence at this point. And so basically what we have here is a situation where all these countries led by the United States cut off their funding of UNRWA based on no evidence, based on just the claims of the Israeli government, the unsubstantiated claims of the Israeli government. And in so doing, they are basically ramping up the starvation and other suffering of the Palestinian people. As the Limkin Institute for Genocide Prevention puts it, the defunding of UNRWA represents a shift by several countries from potential complicity in genocide to direct involvement. They are directly engaged in an act of genocide if they're cutting off funding for an agency that provides a huge amount of food and water and shelter and so forth to the people of Gaza. They are more than just complicit in genocide, they are directly committing it. And in case you don't know who the Limkin Institute is, Raphael Limkin was I forget what his field is, but a political philosopher or whatever, who coined the term genocide and wrote a document that was kind of foundation for the UN's genocide convention. So the Limkin Institute is certainly not nobody's, and this is what they're saying. Now, fortunately, there are a few countries that in Europe that aren't going along with this BS. So far, we've got Ireland, Spain, Scotland, Norway, Belgium, Portugal, Slovenia, and Luxembourg that not only have publicly announced that they will continue to fund UNRWA, but several of them, Spain, I believe, was one of them, have increased their funding to try and just partially compensate for the deficit. And let's see. Many countries in the global south, not that there are very many that are involved in funding UNRWA, but so far, Saudi Arabia and Turkey and Kuwait and Qatar are still funding UNRWA. It's got $103 million during 2022 from other countries. Global South is pretty much universally behind the Palestinians and against Israel's genocide. But the countries marked out in red here, they're the pro-genocide coalition, I guess you could say. So certainly there's pressure mounting on these countries to reverse their decision. Hopefully this will be resolved soon. But in the meantime, Biden and Olaf Scholz and Richie Sunak and so forth, you are committing genocide. Excuse me. And hopefully one day you will be held accountable for your crimes against humanity. Okay, just wanted to do a short little video on that here. And again, tomorrow night, tune in for a conversation with Jose Vega, a newly announced congressional candidate in the Bronx, New York, where he's lived all his life. And you're talking with him about his and all of ours activism for a better world. So please join me tomorrow. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.